traditional economics and business planning in general really assumes logical people making rational choices in everything that they do all the time. And as we're all human, we know that that doesn't really work that way, right?
Hi, this is Victoria Meyer. Welcome back to The Chemical Show, where chemicals means business. Today, I am speaking with Melina Palmer, who is an applied behavioral economist and the CEO of the Brainy Business. So Melina has a passion for helping everyone from around the world to understand what behavioral economics is. And by the way, we're going to get into that, so stay tuned, and how it can be applied to communicate more effectively, run your business more effectively, etc. Melina is the host of the Brainy Business podcast, check it out, and has written 3 books: What Your Employees Want and Can't Tell You, What Your Customers Want and Can't Tell You, and The Truth About Pricing. We're going to be talking about the truth about pricing, but we may touch on those other things today. More importantly, Melina is one of our featured speakers at the Chemical Summit this year. So that's being held on October 8th and 9th, 2024 in Spring, Texas. The theme of, and one of the foundations of the Chemical Summit is thought leadership, creating connections, and getting insights that you can apply. And Melina, in combination with the conversations we'll have at the summit, brings all 3. This is going to be a sellout event. Get your tickets today, thechemicalsummit.com. And Melina is going to give you some insights today, but you're really going to want to hear her in person at the summit. So Melina, thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here now and in person coming up in October.
Yeah, me too. Can't wait. So let's just start with your origin story. How did you get interested in the world of behavioral economics?
Well, I look back to a particular point when I was doing my undergrad. So I was studying business administration and marketing. And there was this one section of one class, like little piece of one book that was talking about buying psychology and why people do the things they do. And I thought it was just the most fascinating thing that I have ever seen and got really excited about it and said, oh my goodness, I need to go get a master's in this. I'm delighted. And I spent the better part of 10 years calling universities that said, that's not a thing. It's not a program. It doesn't exist. We got nothing for you. So it kind of lived on a shelf somewhere, right? Put a pin in it of this thing I might study someday. And I was running a marketing department for a financial institution and got involved with a group that was this like innovation fellowship. They brought in a team from the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University, which is their behavioral economics wing and department. And as they were talking about the work they were doing and their research, I realized, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I have been looking for all of this time. And I found myself a master's program and jumped in. And I knew I was early because of that path that I had been on trying to find schools and things. But especially on the applied side, I didn't know how early I was. And things that were so clear to me about how understanding human behavior is key to brand strategy and internal communication and pricing and all these things in business, just nobody was really talking about it. And so I started to do that and was just at the beginning of this like snowball of people discovering behavioral economics. So then people found the Brainy Business, and that led to books and courses and trainings and all the things that we do today.
Yeah, that's cool. So first of all, the fact that Duke has a department about hindsight
Advanced
is an interesting thing.
hindsight.
Advanced hindsight at that. It's like irony of all names, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. And so I did wonder about that. Are there degree programs today? So you had to really work to seek it out, but is it becoming a more common opportunity?
Yeah. One of the big issues was that I didn't know the name that the field had given itself, right? So behavioral economics doesn't seem like a lot of what it is that we're doing on the surface, especially coming in as a marketer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what to ask for. And it's not always and often not housed in the business school. So that's part of a problem too,
Okay.
right? As we're looking.
Does it go with psychology?
It can, right? So my degree I got from a school of psychology. And so, yeah, psychology or econ, but sometimes it's in part of a philosophy department, or
Mm.
there can be all sorts. So, yes, delighted that there are more and more programs that are coming up, including. So, I work with Texas A&M. We have a certificate in applied behavioral economics that's virtual and available for people all over the world, so that they don't have to struggle through the same type of thing that I went through of trying to find a program.
That's cool. So, all right, let's tackle this. What is behavioral economics and why should leaders care?
Yeah, for you to know why you want to go into all these programs that exist.
Yeah. Why do
So
I want to use it in my business? Yeah.
yeah, so I like to say that if traditional economics and psychology had just the most adorable baby, we would have behavioral economics. And essentially, the reason that the field came about, why it matters, is because traditional economics and business planning in general really assumes logical people making rational choices in everything that they do all the time. And as we're all human, we know that that doesn't really work that way, right?
Yeah.
We have great intentions and then don't follow through, or all sorts of implications that can come up. And a lot of the things that we don't think should matter at a logical level,
Yeah.
the brain is picking up on and it's impacting behavior all the time. So, what behavioral economics does is helps us to understand those rules that the brain is using to make decisions. And in applied behavioral economics, I help companies to understand how they can use that so that more customers buy and employees buy in.
Yeah. So, can you give us an example? Like, just when do we see this in use?
Yeah.
Like, would I recognize it if it jumped up and bit me,
Well, it's
so to
a
speak?
funny thing because for the most part, we don't notice it, and it's because all these things are happening on a subconscious level. So, one of the
Okay.
stats that I love to share with people because it helps as we learn about our brains is
Yeah.
that research shows we humans make 35,000 decisions a day, each of us.
Hmm.
35,000 decisions. How many decisions do you remember making yesterday?
Probably like 5 or 10 or who knows,
Right.
right? Not
Even
that many.
yeah, if I was
I
to
went out to dinner.
stretch,
There was a few decisions in that, but
right.
yeah, it
If
was
I was to really stretch myself, I could come up with 100, right?
okay.
At the most, but not
Yeah.
thousands, let alone
Yeah.
35,000 of them, right? And so we know that really in this way, our lives are just a series of micro moments and micro
Mhm.
decisions. And what behavioral economics is doing is understanding how your brain is making those little decisions. I like to think about it like bumpers in bowling, right? As we're helping to guide
Yeah.
someone down a path, something along those lines. And so, understanding the rules, you can either be working with them to make it easier
Mhm.
to get through, or you can be working against them in a way that can derail things. So, the example that actually comes up, funny enough, is not from either of the two books that we've talked about talking about today, but it's in my brain, so I'm going to bring it up, which is thinking about change and communicating change within an organization or sending even something as simple as an email. So there's this concept of framing and that how we say
Mm.
something matters more than what we say. And so
Yeah.
in this case, I have this example from a boss years ago, and I got an email from her at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. I got an email that says, "We need to talk, be in my office at 2." So
Ooh.
that is one of the scariest emails I've ever gotten.
Yeah, it's gonna trigger you in all kinds of ways,
Right.
right?
And I had
Yeah.
been at this company for, less than 90 days. And so, I spent those 4 hours looking at every project I had been working on, every person I had been talking to. I'm like binge eating all the snacks and texting everybody. I'm so stressed, right? All the way through these four
Right.
hours. I get into her office. She has me sit down and says, "I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow and wanted to let you know that yours is the email I'm putting on my out of office responder."
Oh my gosh.
And that was it, right? That was the point of this meeting. And so,
Which could have been an email
yeah, that could
in
have
the
been
first place.
the email if we had thought about the framing right. So, the thing, and what's really amazing about this is when I was writing about this for my book 10 years later, I
Yeah.
felt the stress, right? My blood pressure increasing as I'm thinking about this experience. And this was just a moment for her. I guarantee
Yeah.
she does not remember it. There wasn't any ill intent. I came to learn over the years, there was a very specific meeting on Thursday mornings where I would get these sort of short
Wow.
emails, right? Mid sort of thought stream, like boop, boop, boop. But if she had been more thoughtful about that email, I lost hours of productive time. And even over the years, and I get these types of emails, I would look at that and you say, it's probably nothing, but what if it is, right? It's always in the
Yeah.
back of your mind. You're living in this state of extra cognitive stress and strain, which makes it to where I'm less likely to be open to change. Like, can you imagine
Yeah.
if she was going to be telling me about a change or something that she needed me to do in that meeting? Even if it's objectively good, I'm not really ready to hear it. And so, a simple
Right.
reframe on that email to say, I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow. Do you have some time to talk about it at 2? Yes, I do, right?
Sure.
And that
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
and
And you would be in a positive state of mind
right.
as opposed to a negative state of mind for that time frame.
Right. And in this case, it's like the first time that she was entrusting for me to be the person on the email. It would have been this delightful thing. And I'm sure she thought it was great, but it was so stressful for me because of this simple way that this is framed. And so research
Yeah.
shows that we spend 17 hours per person per week clarifying something that was previously said.
Wow. That's a lot of time.
Too much time, right? So if we can be a little bit more thoughtful in the way we send those emails, in the points of communication and what we say to people and how we say it, and it frees up,
Yeah.
we'll say 5 hours per person per week. Like, it's amazing when you think about that across
Yeah.
an organization. So where I say you don't necessarily notice it, like you said, you don't see it, but now that you can start to be looking for it, I like to talk about with communication to think about it like popcorn, right? Popcorn's
Yeah.
this great scent that like draws you in when you're going to the movies, and we love it. It can be exciting, enticing, all these things. And we've all been in the office when someone burnt a bag of popcorn.
No doubt.
And it's all anyone can talk about for the rest of the day. And it lingers, right? It's like weeks later and you go, oh, did Melina burn
Yeah.
popcorn again? Right. It's out there, right? So you can look at
Yeah.
your communication and say, is this gonna be burnt popcorn? Like, how could I reframe it so that
Mm,
it's not, right? That's just like simple question that you can ask to think about a reframe that can save tons of time across the team. And really, that's money for the company.
absolutely. And I've learned that along the way. Number one, the burnt popcorn thing.
Yeah. No cooking
But
popcorn
number
at work.
two, no, well, my second daughter just finished her freshman year at Texas A&M, so the
Ah.
Texas A&M connection, and I kid you not, it's like finals week, and she said they got evacuated. There was a fire alarm at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. because somebody had burnt popcorn
Oh.
and set off the fire alarm. It was so bad and smoky and whatever. She's like, "Are you kidding me? We've been in the dorms for 9 months, and you still haven't figured out how to make popcorn." Right? Not to mention the fact that at some point during your prior 19 years, you hadn't learned how to make popcorn. So it's that's interesting. The other piece, though, that communications piece, I've learned, and part of this is kind of the one-to-one learning and the one-to-many learning.
Mm,
But there's with my marketing assistant, I've learned that when I send her ideas, she's ready to implement.
mm,
And I'm like, oh, no, 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 that was just an idea. So I know to frame it as put this in your future folder,
right.
not for today, but for future that we might want to look at this. Um, and then we eliminate the back and forth up front. She knows what I want to do with it. I can still get it off my desk
Right.
and know that, okay, it's someplace where we can talk about it in the future. So it's um, that, but it's an extra, probably a second at this point of thinking before I do something to make it more impactful.
Right. And having that little bit of space up front to be able to plan and say, hey, what do we actually want out of this? Like, what do I want
Yeah.
someone to do? And if we're thinking in these micro moments instead of big
Yeah.
moments of change, right? And it's exactly the same when we're thinking about communicating with customers and getting people to buy, right? And so if we
Yeah.
don't think about, like, okay, well, I want to have like manifested this product and then eventually people buy it. Like that's what's going to happen, right? Well,
Right.
no, right? There are lots of little moments along the way, some that are more important than others, some that are more nudgeable than others. And you can find points where you can be using numbers in a thoughtful way, where you can be incorporating a question, where you can be doing all these things that are helping to move them to that next micro moment, that next decision. And we know all the way where we want them to go down the path, whether
Yeah.
that's internal or external. And right now, if we just get one thing from this, what's the most important next thing to ensure that we're staying on track and on the path? And if we break things down in that way, then we're just that much more thoughtful and things really tie in together. And you can start to say, what can be asynchronous here? Like, what can we turn into a process because we thought about it one time that's going to streamline everything down the way?
Yeah. Cool. So, how does this all tie into pricing? So, I actually have your book here. So, people that are watching the video, your most recent book is around the truth about pricing. Uh, so, I guess the question is, what is the truth?
Yes. And don't worry, I'm not like giving away the whole book in this case because I actually share, I think it's on page 3 that I say what the truth about pricing is in the book, which is that pricing is generally not about the price. And everything that happens before the price matters more than the number on the tag or however, or, in the bid sheet or whatever
Yeah.
it is that we have there. Right. And so all that stuff that happens before the price is this psychology, it's the thoughtfulness of these things we're talking about and how you're framing that message, how you're incorporating all these different aspects into really helping people down the path of by the time they're ready to buy, it doesn't even really matter what the price is. It's secondary.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Birkin bag or the it bag. I was reading an article today in the Wall Street Journal. They were talking about what's the next it bag
Mm.
in terms of handbags. And by the way, I have none of those bags because I'm not willing to spend thousands of dollars. But there's a certain mystique around it that has nothing to do with its functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes certainly in our industry, in the B2B industry and in chemicals, people often think about functionality as the only source of value in pricing. But what you're saying is it's the rest of the story.
Yes. Well, and actually, I have the Birkin is a case study that I have. I give some examples at the end of the book. And yeah, the Birkin bag is one of them because, as you're saying, it's such a fascinating and interesting example where, when we think about utility,
Yeah.
plastic bag from the grocery store that I'm reusing would do the same thing as that Birkin does, right? It
Right.
holds things and has handles. Done it, right? But of course not.
Yeah.
That is not how this works, right? It's not about those things. It's about my identity and knowing we're a herding species. So this piece of social proof, it's driven by scarcity. There's aspects of loss aversion and what it means, for me to be able to have this item, what it says about you, and all these different aspects. And so what I really love about the Birkin too is it's not just about being able to afford it, right? So that's another thing
Yeah.
because there are a lot of really expensive bags and things that someone could spend their money on, but in the case
Yeah.
of Hermes and the Birkin, they have actually set it up that the only way that you can get a Birkin bag is you have to spend now enough money with Hermes outside of this to develop a relationship with a sales associate that they would then recommend you as someone who could get a bag. And you don't get to customize the color or the size or anything for your bag. It's saying, hey, this is now available. You're on the list and you're now eligible to spend thousands of dollars and pay us all this money for a bag in a color you hate that's too small to hold your stuff. Do you want it? And people say, heck yes, I do. And I am going to change.
Yes.
This is now my new favorite color and I'm updating my wardrobe to match the bag, right? Like, but you have to be essentially like nice enough to have the relationship that that sales associate wants to pass you along, which I love, because so often we feel like we have to cater to people that maybe aren't so nice because they happen to
Mhm.
have the money or whatever it is. And if you think about, well, what if we don't do it that way? We could build the model however we want and have it to where people are knocking down our door to be able to spend money with us. Like, it's really cool. I love the Birkin. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, that's cool. And being in a position where people are asking to do business with you and buy your products is a bit of a holy grail, right? As
Hmm.
opposed to having to sell, just being in the position that in some ways you're the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So, how do we translate this to B2B markets? When we, the chemical industry often thinks about um, products being products. And in fact, I talk about this a lot to folks that nobody actually cares about the specification because there's just an assumption that that product is going to do what it does. It's all the other things, quality, relationship, where they perceived value, et cetera. But when you think about this and kind of just the lessons that from behavioral economics, how do they apply into B2B markets?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it is still a human person that is making the decision whether they're going to buy from you or not. In the case of
Yeah.
B2B, what you have is some more complexity, that you have multiple human persons that are various gatekeepers with differing levels of authority. And if you can understand what their motivations are and can cater to those, it helps to streamline a process. So, and knowing they don't all want and need the same things. So there are kind of different levers you
Yeah.
want to pull at different points. So, your CFO is going to be looking at something that's different than that power user or someone that's having to be running something that could impact you, right? Where it's saying, well, we already have all
Yeah.
these things input into a system that we're using. I'd have to change a bunch of these codes to switch to a new vendor. I'm not willing to do it. So, like, got to fire me, and like, good luck, right? That person
Yeah.
could derail everything if you don't know they exist up front to where you can be understanding what they
Mhm.
need. It's like down the path, but if you can think about them in advance and what's going to help them to love this idea, getting them in the room is really key, that they could derail your whole giant sale because they said
Yeah.
no, and you don't even know that they exist if you're not taking the time to be thoughtful about them. So you still need to understand what's going to be appealing to the CEO, the CFO, all these other people along the way, and how you're going to communicate to them. But understanding what behavioral levers to pull with each of them is really key. And so when you are in that B2B space, knowing that you have multiple humans that can interact in different ways and you're just applying the same concepts to each of them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I just recorded an interview. So, in fact, today, so prior to our interview, and that actually gets published a couple weeks before this episode goes live with Gaurav from Solugen. And one of the things they talked about was in terms of, and they're a startup company. So, for your benefit, Melina, there, and actually for other people's benefit who didn't listen to the episode, go listen to it, and aren't familiar with Solugen. They're a startup in chemicals, and they've found an enzymatic way to create chemicals and more carbon. Um, let's just call it carbon beneficial and more sustainable product. But we talked about how did they figure out how to go to market with their customers. They went to the people that were actually using it, right? So often I think the conversations happen between sales and procurement, but actually getting down to where the actual users of the product are and what their pain points are, why they use it, what they like about it, they found to be really valuable, right? So the operator who's using the product has a very different need than the procurement manager, than the business manager, than the CFO, than the CEO. And understanding all those various touch points becomes pretty critical.
Right. Right. Well, and that's
Yeah.
so here where what you said is a piece that's like down the line, other people that like it, and we're able to share and say, people like you like this thing and are seeing value from it. Right. That's our
Mhm.
testimonials. That's social proof. That's the same thing I was talking about with the Birkin bag. Right. So it's the same
Yeah.
concept, but we're thinking about it in a, people like you have done and trust this. It's the star ratings and reviews we see on Amazon and how many followers people have wherever else. We humans are really motivated by that, and it helps us to feel safe in making a decision. And so accreditations and certifications, those are a form of social proof as well, to show that you can trust us. Other people did some due diligence and vetted us. We're trustworthy. Even being able to say, amongst our clients like you, this is the most popular choice, right? That's a
Mm,
social proof piece. And so it feels like sometimes we shouldn't have to say that. It shouldn't be about that. Yeah, it is.
right.
It's about that. And if you omit those things, it just makes it so much
Yeah.
harder to sell. And so if you can line up, so in the truth about pricing, I give these steps of how you're going to be shaping out pricing, how to think about it, all the things that happen before the price, right? And we can say, if you've built out what that best offer is, what you know is the best thing for most people to buy from you, and then you
Yeah.
wanna put all your eggs in making it obvious that this is the best choice, and it's maybe it's the best value, perhaps it's something that's most popular, but we're making it very clear that this is a good choice. Testimonials line up with it. It's also profitable for you, and it's something that's really great for the customer, right? So we're layering all those things in.
Yeah.
And then you wanna create this, what I call the wingman product or service that is
Hmm.
in addition to this. And that wingman is typically something that is also going to be a high anchor, right? So it is more expensive and likely has more stuff in it than what most people
Yeah.
would need. And you
Yeah.
would talk about that thing first, so that we say, okay, we've got this thing, and I'm going to use much, lower, easier numbers here as we're saying, but it's like, this is the
Yeah.
$10,000 option, and it's got the extra deals and stuff in it. We also have this thing that's
Yeah.
7,500, and it's easy for most, right? Then like most people pick this one, and that's a great option for you. If you started low and say, well, we can get in as low as 2,500, and there's the $7,500 thing I think you should get, or we have something that's $10,000, like, ugh, like those are way too expensive.
Right.
And they might have been the same thing, but
Right.
when we start high, it makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So that whole anchor high,
Yes.
as you do in negotiations, right? Or anchor low, depending on which direction you want to go. So I think in the industry, there's often this belief that pricing is kind of almost solely based on supply demand, or solely based on cost of goods sold, or maybe not solely, but it's 80%. Let's just say 80% of the price is supply demand or feedstock related. How do you respond to that when you think about that as a pricing mechanism?
Yeah. I disagree clearly, right? In that I
Yeah.
wrote a book saying something else. And in the way, but if it's all you think about, you can very easily make it about that, right? If you don't think about all the
Mm.
psychology, it comes down to price because people don't have
Yeah.
anything else to be thinking about. If you're just looking at what your competitors are pricing at, and or going, like you said, off cost of goods sold or whatnot, and you do a percentage above, and you're talking to someone about this like nitty gritty numbers stuff, sure, they're going to focus on that because you made it about that. But if
Mm.
you don't, it doesn't have to be. And that's where all these
Yeah.
psychological principles from behavioral science come in.
Yeah. So that's when you start focusing in on how are you using it? What's the value? What do you value, and how are you in our product or in this product, et cetera? Is that how you would go into it?
Yeah, and I mean, just even my favorite example to show how you can break yourself free of this. So there's a chapter in The Truth About Pricing that's called You, right? In saying that you, the collective you, are really the biggest hurdle to pricing
Mm.
working and being able to sell things at a higher price point if that's what works for you. It's not all about raising
Yeah.
prices. I have examples
Right.
of, for value businesses where how can we bring this down as much as we can, right? What are our
Mm.
options there if you're wanting to sell, lower margins but higher quantities and things like that. So it doesn't have to be about that, but if we're thinking about raising prices and we're so fixed on the cost, right? I want you to imagine that you're going to be selling grilled cheese sandwiches. So when we think about a grilled cheese sandwich, you as a customer, how much would you pay for one? You really want a grilled cheese.
$5. I don't know.
Right.
It depends on where I go.
Right.
If I'm going to my kitchen, it's slave labor free, right?
You're right. We know that the cost of items to make a grilled cheese is maybe $1, right? And
Yeah.
even a terrible cook could probably put one together. You could, make your way through this sort of thing. And like you said, maybe you pay $5 for one. I've had people say 10, 15. I think even like 20 or 25 is the highest. I've heard someone say if it's like, but I'm expecting a pretty fancy grilled cheese, right? And I really wanted one.
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah.
restaurant in New York City. It's called Serendipity 3. They have a $214 grilled cheese sandwich that they sell.
Wow.
And yes,
What
it's
makes it special?
but so aren't you intrigued now? Don't you feel like you kind of want to
I
try
am
it?
intrigued.
I want to know what the hype's about, right? I want to get in on this thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's flecks of gold in the crust, and it's made with Dom Perignon champagne and this very special cheese from these cows that only lactate for a certain period of time, and they graze on licorice and strawberries and all this stuff, right? It's like a whole thing. But this is the framing. We're priming you
And there's
into
a
this
whole story around it.
scarcity, and we want to be a part of the thing, right? Like it's I kind of
Yeah.
would want to try. And if I'm in New York with the family, we want to share about it on social media and be posting about it, right?
Yeah.
Our social proof coming back in. They also have $200 french fries that had a wait list of 8 to 10 weeks when they launched. They have $1,000 vanilla sundae. They have more normally priced things too, but imagine you're going there, maybe you're not gonna get the $200 sandwich because,
Yeah.
but you might get a $35 sandwich to say you were there and you were part of the vibe
Right.
and you wanna talk about it, right? So that's that high anchor of something that even with these
Oh,
extreme
interesting.
examples, right? Even with the most expensive ingredients, it's not like they're only making $14 on the sandwich when they're spending 200 on ingredients, right? That's not what's happening here. But they've turned it into this vibe about the brand that we want to invest to be a
Mm.
part of it because it's serendipity 3, right? It's what it is. And I'm part
Wow.
of their clients. I'm cool. I'm in the in crowd. You just wish you were cool like me. And they let me buy a sandwich for them for $30. Right?
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good example of anchoring, right? Anchoring high because, um, I mean, apparently somebody buys a $200 grilled cheese. And if I take this back to the chemical industry in a B2B example, that there are often products that are special. Maybe they're special because of the way that they're made. Their sustainability profile today is obviously a big thing. Maybe their performance criteria. Uh, but I'm like, okay, well, I can't necessarily make that work in formulation, but I can make the next best thing work.
Hmm.
And then the next best thing, in your case, a $35 grilled cheese, seems like a bargain,
Right.
even though I would never normally spend $35 for a grilled cheese. Maybe I wouldn't normally spend $1 a pound on a particular product, but by comparison, if I'm comparing it to the product I really want that's $10 a pound, a dollar seems really affordable.
Right. Right. And even for that's why I talk about it as the wingman, right? Instead of sometimes throughout
Mm.
behavioral science, you'll see this referred to as decoy pricing, right? And I don't
Okay.
love that term because decoy makes it sound like the other thing is bad, right? So it shouldn't be
Yeah.
bad, but it's like its whole job though. You should be delighted if someone buys the wingman, right? Like, hooray, how
Yeah.
cool, right? And the wingman's job is to make the best offer look good, right? That's what it's there
Mm.
to do. In this case, if you have that sustainable option or whatnot, what I have found over the years too, sometimes it's bundling, right? So you can bundle two things
Mm.
that you offered together, and that becomes this high anchor price. People didn't even know they could get this other thing, but like, cool, like that's nice to know. You don't have to discount it, anything else. It can just be something that's already there. You talk about first, say, or you could just start with one of them, and this is how much that thing would cost, right? And people are amazed time and time again as you create the wingman, you have that high anchor, whether it's
Yeah.
a bundle or something. People go, "Oh my, I didn't even know I could get this." Like, yes, I want this thing. Right. Like, and then you realize, oh,
Got it.
actually, the thing I thought was the high anchor is what we should really be selling. And now we can create a new wingman. Like, and it's an
Yeah.
easy way to raise your prices as you get some wins.
Yeah. And as you talk about the bundling, it makes me think about we used to, and this is a practice that I learned when I was at Shell, and I know other companies probably followed around MISO, multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. But part of the deal is that uh, it's not just product, it's pricing terms, it's delivery, maybe level of R&D, and being able to actually pull those multiple pieces together that you may or may not have valued individually, that you may or may not have considered as part of your offer, but having it be part of your offer bundle, and then being able to compare bundle A with bundle B. What's really important to you,
Mm-hmm.
that as a seller, I'm happy to offer, and as the buyer, you're happy to receive.
Yes,
And it makes it all feel more valuable, right?
absolutely.
And you could theoretically get a better price for it, no matter how you define better.
Right. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've got a lot of questions for you on this, but we're going to run out of time. So maybe just let me start with this. There seems to be a strong element of linguistics, right? When I think about part of your early example about how you write an email and the response that that creates, what I might happen to say about a product or service, or how I identify you as the hero in the story about getting this product or service. There seems to be a strong element of linguistics in this. Is it true? Is this about language as much as it is about value and pricing and negotiations?
Yeah, and we've potentially opened the Pandora's box of one of my like passion spots. So I'm gonna rein myself in at least a little bit response. But it definitely is, and showing the power of the right word can change so much. So our brains work in associations when we're talking about things, and the right word can either keep us moving forward and the wrong word can kind of throw things off. So even something as simple
Yeah,
as if you want someone to know that it's expensive, right, for whatever you're talking about, but you don't want to be like, "Hey, it's expensive, so don't talk to me unless you have money," right? Because that doesn't
right.
really feel great. Even just saying the word investment, right? So this would be an investment
Mm,
in you and whatnot, right? That one word can make a real difference. And there's an entire kind of adjacent field that is emerging that is known as cognitive semiotics, which is essentially how the mind makes meaning and understanding the power of metaphor and the choices that we use in words and images and how that is impacting
mm.
decisions people are going to make. And so the research shows that every 25th word that we use is a metaphor. Every 25th word we say is actually a metaphor.
Huh.
And so we
All right,
don't
give me an example of this, because give me an example of that. Yeah, because I'm having a hard time believing it.
inflation is rising,
Ah,
right?
yeah, okay.
Right? It's not,
Yeah,
but it is, right? That's how we can understand it, right? And so
yeah,
we're
okay.
making these associations to these sort of physical properties all the time. We talk about funds as being liquids, right? So we have liquid
Right.
assets, funds are frozen, we're drowning in debt, right? We use these terms all the time. We're not actually doing those things, but they are the way that we think about them and how we talk about things. And so when you can align your metaphors in a proper way, it reduces the cognitive load for someone. And so there was some research
Mm,
done talking about so if you talk about like medication for depression, and you can say it's either, so if you talk about someone being coming into the light, or they're going to be more
yeah,
uplifting, right? And when you align the metaphor, it's more impactful than if you say, like, depression brings you down and this medication can help bring you into the light. You're like, okay, what? Like that
yeah,
feels
right.
weird, right? But when you can line the two things up and say, the problem is like this, we do this, and they match, right? So depression's bringing you down, this medication will help you feel uplifted. You're going to be on the rise. You're coming out of this thing, right? People just naturally go, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. So if we don't even
Got it.
realize that we're using a metaphor every 25th word, guarantee you're
Yeah,
mixing them up a lot and it's not
right.
lining up. right? So if you just even think, what do we want to be and say, like here for the Brainy businesses that we help you unlock what's possible, right? And making sure we have keys and locks and things open
Mm,
being unlocked, or it's in the vault, it's not available right now. That sort of metaphor we want to go all in on because it helps with that consistency in the brain. And so again, it comes back to thoughtfulness, knowing what you're going to be about, what that means, and how you can line all that up. So yes, linguistics is a part of it, imagery is a part of it, and it all comes down to thoughtful alignment.
yeah. So I know you work with a lot of companies, helping them understand all of these elements. And it strikes me that, obviously this is introducing a new approach, some of which may already be happening. And in some cases, it's instinctive, right? I think for some people, some of this is instinctive in terms of how they frame things, position things, etc. For others, it's not,
Mm.
right? And I think, I think about the truth about pricing when I think about what your customers want. It's aligning your business, whether it be the salespeople, business managers, product, plant, etc. And it's not necessarily easy to wrap your head around this and align it. So, are there a couple of like easy suggestions in terms of how you find um, the steps to get companies and their organizations aligned to be thinking this way, and to be framing their conversations in this way?
Yeah, and so of course, thank you for asking that. And for us, the Brainy Business, we're a teaching and mentoring organization, and so what we specialize in is helping align those trainings for organizations so they can
Yeah,
be having, like, these are the concepts that you and your team should know around leadership. These are the concepts you should know
yeah,
if you're looking at pricing or if you're looking at experience and brand design, and to be able to say, these are a few things that you should know. This is what's really going on. Here's how you can start to use it. That is the core of what we do here at the Brainy Business. So people can, you don't have to go get the PhD in this and, way down the road, maybe someone's going to be able to apply this for you. And so, what I recommend for people as you're getting started, right, and trying to figure out a couple
yeah,
things, we talked about the email as a point that we can start with, right? And if you think you like
yeah,
this idea of framing, right, and that resonated with you, you say, you know what? I'm going to be thoughtful about one more email this week, right? We micro moments too, right? It's not that we're going to go try and do everything all at once. If I'm going to do one thing, one email, every email this week, I'm going to try to be really thoughtful about the subject line and what I'm wanting somebody to do. Or,
yeah,
going into my sales calls for the next month, I'm going to think about anchoring and how I can create what's my wingman going to be. And I'm going to try that out for a month and I'm going to see what happens, right? Test one thing and go in on it, know why you're doing it, and just see, right, what you can get. But you want to
mm,
know what the end result is, what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to do that little test and you'll start to see some lift in a really exciting way.
yeah. That's cool. All right. My final question, and I could ask you some more, but we're gonna maybe make this the final one. Um, Maybe I'm gonna have two actually. Um, what do you see? So you obviously work with a lot of different business leaders. What are the characteristics that stand out in business leaders that are most effective in maybe leading their companies or businesses, or in helping them um, turn the tide towards more behavioral centricity in how they're running their businesses?
I love this question. I don't think I've ever been asked this specific question, and it's one of my favorite ones. So thank you. I would say that it is this openness to learning, right? Being and this like coachability, feedback sort of space, and knowing that this it starts with you opportunity, right? So the
Yeah.
ripples of change start with that one thing, right? And it's nice
Yeah.
to say, oh, wouldn't it be great if someday we did that? But until they do this, there's nothing to be done. Those who take an action, like I'm talking about that one email, that one change you're going to make, go do it And then you can talk about it and being able to look at yourself and saying, what might I be doing that's not helping me on this journey? And how might I change that? And I want to learn more about
Mm.
that. And I want to tell other people about the value I'm seeing. You get inspired, excited. It's making people want to be a part of that. They want to try that little change because you were successful too, right? So that openness to learning, to knowing that the way that you've done it isn't necessarily perfect and the only way,
Mm.
or whatever that is, but opportunities for change and testing some new things out, they are, and just a general interest in humans and people and
Yeah.
their behavior, and knowing that when you work with people, things just can work better, and trying to be generous
Yeah.
with others. Those sorts of mindsets are the ones that are most receptive to behavioral economics, and see lots of success as they start to implement.
Yeah, love it. And experimentation, that's what comes to mind when you say that,
Definitely.
is being willing to experiment and keep learning. So
Yeah.
great. Well, Melina, this was really cool. Thank you for sharing your insights. And, we touched on a lot of topics around behavioral economics and other things. I think there's a lot of food for thought here. And I know you're going to be imparting some different wisdom, especially as we think about customers when you come to the Chemical Summit later this year. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Keep listening, keep following, keep sharing, and we will talk with you again soon.